Yeah, one thing that I find interesting in my discussions about these issues with people, and you can read texts on the matters as well, is that everybody sort of begins and ends the discussion with an affirmation of the mystery of the doctrines of the Trinity and the Incarnation. Karl Rahner, his book, The Trinity, on page 50, he says that the Trinity is an absolute mystery which we do not understand even after it's been revealed to us. John of Damascus, also in his work called On Heresies, towards the end, he says, don't ask how the Trinity is Trinity, because the Trinity is inscrutable. I think that there's something strange here. On the one hand, admitting from the start that the Trinity is mysterious and that we don't understand what the Trinity doctrine is. On the other hand, writing very many books with hundreds and thousands of pages in them and making a lot of arguments and responding to counter arguments in defense of a doctrine that you admit you don't understand what it's saying. It seems to me that the more you try to defend something, the more you understand it, and the less you understand something, the less there is to defend, because this defensive posture presupposes that you understand what you're defending. So I don't understand. It seems to me that people are not like consistent in the way that they approach these doctrines. I think what's going on is that they want to defend the doctrine of the Trinity against the claim of logical incoherence, but they do not want to commit themselves to any particular well-defined interpretation of the doctrine, because if they do, then you very quickly run into theological problems, as everybody knows. So I think there's something weird going on here. This quote that you have here also, try to explain it, lose your mind, try to deny it, lose your soul. There is something strange in demanding that people believe things that they can't understand for the sake of salvation. I think there's something weird here. I think that this general phenomenon, this action, taps into some very deep corner of the human psyche, some part of our psychology, and provokes severe religious anxiety. And it provokes like a severe anxiety in us and a fear that if we don't fall in line, if we don't listen to our superiors, if we don't show proper deference to the tradition, then we are going to be outside of God's good graces. Now, what's happening there is that we are confusing God with people who claim to be speaking on behalf of God. All right, so these people claim to be speaking on behalf of God. They tell me that unless I believe this, I'm going to go to hell. What's really happening is that they're touching something. They're poking at some deep part of me that is afraid of God, and that is afraid that God will reject me. In order to convince myself somehow that I have God's good favor, I listen to what they say. I think it's a form of manipulation. It's an inappropriate use of religious authority to tell people that you have to believe something or else God is going to damn you. And, oh, by the way, this thing that you have to believe, I can't make any sense of it to you, and neither can you, so don't try. Like I said, I think that what's going on here is more a matter of sort of deep religious psychology, touching on religious anxieties that exist in a lot of people, if not quite in everyone, rather than, pure academic inquiry and theological discussion.
Yeah, so it's the old ancient Catholic tradition of, I think I read somewhere that back in the not so good old medieval age, the Catholic priest used to walk into the church with his back to the parish, to the congregants, and read the Bible in Latin with his back to the people, and then walk out. And that was the pretty much the Catholic Church service back in the day. Let me ask you about, I often hear this argument. You cannot possibly know who God is. I mean, God is too big for your little mind. I mean, how dare you, question the Trinity? Similar to this.
Well, this is another common argument, and I question exactly how useful it is. On the one hand, we cannot possibly know who God is. On the other hand, you're trying to tell me exactly what God is. So it seems like you have to choose, right? To the extent that you can tell me what God is, to that extent, you can know who he is. To the extent that you can't know who God is, to that extent, even your preferred doctrine of Trinity or incarnation is in trouble. So it seems to me that a lot of the argumentation and the reasoning in defense of these doctrines is selective. When it's useful, we appeal to divine incomprehensibility. When it's useful, we appeal to divine simplicity. When it's useful, we appeal to this or that other notion in the Bible. But I don't think that there's anything principled going on. I think if there's any principle whatsoever, it's that we are trying by any means necessary to assert our doctrine. And so everything else is used for the service of asserting our doctrine. It's like trying to build a house and using whatever materials you have at your disposal, but the materials don't work well together, right? So you can build the walls out of a certain kind of material, but if you use a certain kind of nail, well, either the nails will break that material or something will happen, they'll fall right out, right? So you have to think about the whole. You have to make sure that not only the whole is clearly in your mind, but the materials that you're using make sense. And it seems to me that what's going on here in these kinds of doctrines is that when it's convenient, people will appeal to this notion that we can't understand God, but when it's inconvenient, they just forget it, right? And they say, oh, well, actually, God has revealed this to us. So I think there are inconsistencies going on in these discussions.